officers are hard to get, but speakers are hard to get also. So I'm the speaker for tonight. I was going to do this one when it snowed, and get my speaker out here. Alice who? And Wanda wanted to know this morning, who is Alice? I said, you got to come tonight. And so she's here. She wanted to know who Alice was. But let me find my, yeah, here it is. Now, Robert's in charge of keeping me in line. All right, back in 1592, there was a guy named Judson Cogswell who was born in Westbury, England. I'll skip the other two names. And he turned around and married the vicar of Westbury, and decided they wanted to come to America after marriage. He was 23 years old, and when they got married, and about 10 years later, they decided, 10 years later, they wanted to move to America. And they got on this ship called the Angel Gabriel. And they made it all the way to the United States. And according to what I read, it took almost 2 months to get there from England. I don't know what they did all that time. Maybe they had a misprint like I did the other day talking about Dr. Smith, how many babies he delivered. And Kathy called me, and what did I put down, 5,000? 4,000, and it was 2,000. I do times two fingers. But anyway, they headed to America on the ship Angel Gabriel. And just before they got here, they run into it didn't say it was a northeasterner, but it was up northeast. And they ran into a storm up around Maine. And what it did, it tore the ship all to pieces. And they got out and got on pieces of wood and so forth. And all the mama and the daddy, John and Elizabeth, and 8 kids all made it to shore without anybody getting killed. And when they got there, this was in Maine, they heard about in Ipswich, Connecticut, they could move and get a free farm of 300 acres if they'd stayed on it for 10 years or whatever. It was called a grant, a land grant of 300 acres. And they moved there and they did. And they built their house and that was home. Now we skip ahead to 220 years. I didn't think you'd be interested in the other 220 years. We skipped ahead 220 years, and there was a guy named Judson Moss Bemis who was born in 1833. And 1845, 12 years later, there was a woman named Alice Cogswell. And that's Alice. They were at Alice who? It's Alice Cogswell. She was born in Ipswich, Massachusetts. Yeah, that's what it was, Massachusetts instead of Connecticut. And I have a picture. I don't know if it's on there. Is it on there, Robert? Yeah, here we go. The top picture there is her house. Now that's a nice house. So it looks to me like she was in a rich family. And that's her picture when she was 10 years old. And down below is Judson Moss Bemis' first factory where he made sewed bags. And that's Judson Moss Bemis when he had black hair. We've got pictures all around here of Judson when he was a gray-headed guy, but that's when he was a young guy. And he operated his bag. He opened that bag factory when he was 25 years old. In fact, he rented the top floor. That wasn't the whole thing, wasn't his. There was a machine shop down below, and they provided steam, so forth, for printing, running a printing press. Keep knocking stuff off here. When Alice and her sister Lucy were teenagers, they were sent to a seminary. And you ask, why a seminary for girls? Well, the answer is because churches were who had all the schools back then. You didn't have Madison County schools. You had a Baptist school or whatever. And they went to this private college, which was a seminary, for 2 years. And it was for rich folks, naturally, because you had to pay your way. And her and Lucy and Alice were big friends. And 1864, right after the college, Lucy got married, and she married a guy named Roberts. Does that sound familiar? Roberts? What about Newtown? Roberts Street. It's not Robert Street, it's Roberts with an S on it. And that was her name. Her Alice's sister married a Roberts. and that became, and Alice moved in with her. She lived there until she married Judson Moss. But after they, let's see, Judson Moss Bemis was running his bag factory, and he decided he needed to have a business office in Boston where all the money was. St. Louis was kind of like Jackson, it was broke. But Boston had all the money back in those days. And he went to Boston to open up an office. And while he was there, he had a client who was buying his bags. And you don't need to know, but his name was Zenas Cushing. And he said, Zenas told Judson, said, I'm the guardian of a young lady back in your hometown of St. Louis. And right now she's visiting her aunt in St. Louis, but she really lives here in Boston. And said, would you care to have a letter of introduction from me to her? And Judson, he wasn't married at the time, he said to himself, yeah. So he got this letter of introduction. That was not uncommon back in those days to get a letter, especially among the rich folks, to get a letter of introduction. He got the letter and stuck it in his pocket, went back to St. Louis, and he had to fire somebody. It's the reason he left Boston. He had to fire somebody in St. Louis. But he got there, and I don't know if he reached in his pocket, but anyway, he probably had the same suit on. And he reached in his pocket, and there was this envelope, the letter of introduction. And so he went over and found out where she was. And St. Louis wasn't that big back then. And he looked her up. They visited a few times. And about the time they got the dating good, she had to go back to Boston. Well, that left Judson in St. Louis without a girlfriend. But I'm sure they wrote letters. But they didn't hear from each other, didn't talk on the phone, because that was 10 years before the phone was invented. And so I'm sure it was letters. And They were married less than a year after they were first introduced. And at that time, she was still living with her sister Lucy Roberts. And as soon as they got married, she left Lucy, Alice left Lucy and moved to St. Louis with Judson and became a part of the St. Louis crowd. And this was the same time that he changed the name from Bemis Bag Company to Bemis Brothers Bag Company, because things was getting it was getting bigger and bigger. So he took Stephen on. And Rosa, they used to say, it was not Bemis Brothers Bag Company, it was Bemis Brother Bag Company. Well, for 50 years, it was Bemis Brothers Bag Company. And when Stephen died, Judson made it Bemis Brothers Bag Company. And so that's a little trivia there in case somebody asks you if you're on TV. And anyway, they moved to Boston, Massachusetts, and then they went over to Newton, Massachusetts, and had a couple of kids, Maud and little Lucy, who died when she was 3. And then there was Alice, but she wasn't Alice Jr. And Newton, Massachusetts was just 10 miles from Boston, so it wasn't that big a deal. But she became a big shot over there. She was involved in all the women's clubs, and donating money from the company to the poor folks. And Newton, Massachusetts just loved her because of her freedom with money and donations to the poor and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, she became a part of the life in Newton. And then she moved back to Boston again, because she was spending too much time in Newton. And Judson says, "You're spending too much time, you need to be helping me." So she dropped all that and came back to Boston to help. And she was a go-getter. Whatever she did, she got really involved in all that. And with his money and her energy, she could do wonders. But while this was going on, after 11 years in Boston and working there with the church and the community, she developed a serious throat problem. And I don't know, it didn't say what, but it was so serious that the doctor recommended she go to Florida for the winter from up in Massachusetts. And so in the winter of 1881 and 1882, she went to Florida to get better. But that didn't work. Next year, she did it again. She still didn't get well. So the doctor said, "What you need is low humidity." Well, Florida was the worst place. That's the highest humidity in the United States. So he said to go to Colorado Springs. High elevation, cool weather, low humidity. And she went there, and it did make a difference. And it, for 3 years, they went to Colorado Springs, and finally they just moved there because of her health. And Judson's half of his business was in Boston. He was continually on the train, riding from St. Louis to Boston, to St. Louis. And she was on the train, riding to Colorado, and back to St. Louis. And while he was in Boston, the kids, she would take the kids up there and stay all summer long so that the kids would know who their daddy was. And after that, they didn't see him again till the next year. But anyway, rich folks live different. And they had a son, in 1883, and his name was Judson, named after his daddy, but he wasn't Junior, he was just Judson something else, I forgot what it was. But he went to manual training school, which is kind of like shop or something like that, or learning how to weld, or back in those days, I don't know what they was doing. But he went to St. Louis from Colorado and to go to school. And while he was in school, he died. When he died, her little sister, her little niece, we called her Little Lucy, she died of scarlet fever. So she had two deaths there real close together. It changed her life a lot because she was kind of depressed for a long time. But in this new house that he was living in Colorado Springs, for the next 32 years they lived in Colorado Springs, and this was the headquarters or the center for all the relatives in the family and all the friends in the town. She really had a nice place and loved to entertain. And the throat trouble did get better. And after it got better, they started going on visitation. They started taking vacations back to Massachusetts area where they had a lot of friends. And then she went overseas, went to, I think she went to England one time. I can't remember where the other place was, but she was always traveling. And the train it took a while. I looked it up Googled it, and it takes 2 days by train to go from Boston to Colorado Springs, and with all the stops, I guess is the reason. But it's 2,000-mile trip, and I'd want to ride a train because I sure wouldn't want to ride a car 2,000 miles. But let's see here. In 1909, are we there? Yeah, we are. Judson Moss retired, and they started living in the summertime. They go to Lake Ohawk in New York, and Alice really liked that. But summertime, her throat trouble never did bother too much. It was just in the wintertime. And her last 7 years, her last 7 summers were spent in New York at this lake. And then she'd come back to Colorado and work at the Colorado Springs community. And she especially liked the kids at the college. And Judson did too. And she liked the kids at what they call the YMCA. And so she liked the YMCA. And they had sort of, it wasn't organized, but she decided that she'd buy the land and give them a place to put a YMCA. It was 1916. The YMCA in Bemis was built in 1916. So she was getting big in the YMCA in 1916, and I'm sure Judson did too. But this is her story, not his story. She used his money. But she worked tirelessly at the YMCA and the community centers around, and also the churches. And she belonged to every club in town. Everybody wanted her to be in their club. And every women's club had Alice. And whenever she died, they donated money at the college for the Cogswell Hall, because she gave so much money to the Colorado State University. And also there was a Cogswell Theater using her maiden name. And not married. She was married, but they still use Cogswell to distinguish her. And in 1917, she left Boston to go back to Colorado, and she just had a small cold. And 9 days later, probably two of them or three of them was on the train. She died of pneumonia, double pneumonia, and how many years? Wait, she was 72 years old, and Judson died 3 years later. So, and he was 88. So he lived. He was older to start with. So anyway, and that's the end of Judson and Alice. And if you wanna, I got a lot of this from her obituary, not obituary, but her memorial on Find a Grave. I think Kathy might have sent this to me, I don't know. But it talks about all she did and where she moved to and all that. But one of the things that stood out in her memorial was that she was a public-spirited person. And she was a lifelong member, I don't know how much money that cost, of the Ipswich Historical Society. And she supported them with money, extra money, not just dues, for years and years. And I believe that's about it. Oh, it said that she was the least self-indulgent person anybody could know. She never lived for her wealth. She lived to help others with her wealth. So she's somebody you want to know if you run short. Maybe she did. But anyway, it had said she had a strong character and good judgment. And her tombstone, do we have a picture of that tombstone? I took it out. It was just a simple tombstone about the height of this chair's, and about as wide as the chair, and about 2 inches thick. Very simple tombstone. And so she did, even when she died, she didn't spend money. her relatives didn't either. But anyway, she died just like she lived, helping other people. Anybody have any questions? I might not know the answer, but you can ask it. All right. That's the end of that.